Today on the HopeFilled Financial Podcast, I'm going to share with you my biggest laptop mistake that I've ever made. Our budget tip is going to be about how computers and phones and technology in general doesn't need to be replaced every year. Instead of a listener question, I got some wonderful advice from a listener on buying refurbished computers. And that's a good segue into the main topic. For today's main topic, I'm going to share with you how to get the most bang for your buck if you're buying an Apple laptop. If you're into Apple Silicon like I am, you don't want to miss it. Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. My name is Jay Disberger, your one and only HopeFilled Financial Coach, and I'm happy that you're with us today. To get things started, I made a bad mistake the first time I ever bought a laptop brand new. Let's go back. It's around 2017 or 2018. I'm currently driving a 2011 17-inch MacBook Pro laptop. Now, this was a laptop that was given to me by my father so I could help him with spreadsheets. I've mentioned that in a past episode. At this point, I had used this behemoth of a laptop for the entirety of my college career and gotten used to its major flaw. If you're an Apple junkie, you're probably familiar with the 2011 MacBook Pro problem, where it would burn through the motherboard or the graphics card on the machine and need replaced. And Apple was replacing them for free because it was a design issue. They were literally burning themselves up if you were a heavy laptop user, and I definitely was as an engineering student. And it was around 2017 or 2018 when Apple announced that they were going to take the 2011 laptop and name it vintage. Now, when Apple names a computer vintage, that means they're not going to guarantee that their Apple stores are going to have replacement parts or components that could be used to make an easy repair in-house. And in short order, they won't be able to repair the machine even if you mail it in. Well, given that the 2011 laptop was burning through motherboards for me once a year, I wasn't going to be able to keep this thing around, so I traded it to someone else for my current iPhone. Yes, I know my phone is old. I had two other factors that were really driving me to get a new laptop. One was I was still technically in college when I was in the market for a new laptop. And that meant I could get a student discount. Now, this is a mistake that I didn't think about. I was looking to make a big purchase because I could get a deal on it. While trying to get the student discount would have been smart in a vacuum, it really wasn't the ideal situation given my other factor. My dad had a laptop from 2016. It had the fastest Intel 4-core CPU that had ever been in an Apple laptop. And the machine I was looking at, if I upgraded it to the maximum specifications, would have a faster 4-core CPU and discrete graphics that would knock the socks off my dad's laptop. And I wanted to get a machine that outperformed the one that my dad had. I thought that would be cool. And I rationalized it by saying getting the most expensive machine I could would maximize my student discount, since it's relative to the sticker price. On the whole, I spent, after Apple Care and shipping and taxes, over $5,000 on my laptop setup. And hearing it again today, I want to reiterate, it has a 4-core Intel i7 processor. The first Apple Silicon MacBook Air with the M1 chip can run circles around my machine. And it only took a couple years from the machine that I bought for Apple Silicon to come out. It did not take long at all for what I spent a bunch of money on to not only become a dinosaur in the Apple world, but become something that no one was going to spend near that much money on to buy used. So I had lost most of the money I invested in this laptop due to circumstantial depreciation, due to the fact that no one wants to buy a used MacBook Pro with an Intel chip in it when they could get something new with Apple Silicon, and any Apple Silicon option is going to smoke what came before them. But I had computer fever, I wanted the student discount, and I wanted to have a machine that was faster than what my dad currently had. Needless to say, he currently drives an Apple Silicon MacBook Pro that just drives circles around anything that I've had since. I guess the lesson that I learned here would be to do my due diligence and research, not spend all the money that I could for every bell and whistle that's going to be made obsolete, and have a little bit of patience if I think there's something worth waiting for. Now it's time for today's budget. Today's budget tip is your technology doesn't need to be updated every year. If we believe the advertisements that we saw for the latest iPhones or Samsung phones or Google phones, we would believe that we needed to have the latest and greatest phone every single year. And when it comes to laptops, they get replaced every year or two with the next greatest, fastest thing under the sun. But if we replace our technology too frequently and we pay good money for it, all we're doing is driving up the amount of money that we spend per year on technology through the roof. Think of it this way. If you replaced your technology every other year, you could cut the amount that you spend on technology in half by just keeping one device for 4 years. My phone I've had for nearly 7 years now, and it works great. Sure, it might run into some planned obsolescence in the near future, but I've gotten some really good use out of this phone. And I'm going to try, because I spent so much money on it, to get a number of years out of my laptop before I have to replace it, even though the $5,000 laptop just got named vintage by Apple this year. I digress. What we want to focus on is maximizing our efficiency, maximizing our frugality when it comes to technology. And that means minimizing the cost per year that we spend on that technology. And the easiest way to do that is simply to use our technology as long as we possibly can before replacing it, and accepting that we don't need the newest, shiniest, latest model of phone or laptop every year. Now it's time to move on to what is normally the listener question, but is really just some wonderful advice I got on the computer topic. So earlier today, I was answering comments on the YouTube channel for the podcast, basically trying to answer questions that were popping up for the latest topics. And there were a couple questions on a breakout budget tip. That's not very normal. The budget tips don't get a whole lot of attention. I put a whole playlist together for all of the budget tips because if you're budgeting, I figured that would be a really useful resource. But I got this comment, and I offhandedly mentioned after responding to it and thanking them that I was getting ready to record this episode about computers today, and asked if they had a question. Well, the response that I got from Fred was a wonderful email that outlined that he has some excellent experience when it comes to refurbished computers, professional experience at that. And instead of a question, he had some wonderful advice that I really want to extend to all of you. While not the entirety of the message I received, this is the main point from the email that Fred sent to me. One thing to consider is this. Amazon and eBay offer refurbished computers, but I have seen many videos analyzing them and finding no real refurbishment, or substandard parts, or misconfiguration, due to ignorance or lack of caring. Who can say? What I am getting at is, if buying refurb, how would an inexperienced user know if it is any good? And how well does whoever sold it stand behind it? In my case, I am buying refurbished equipment from a mom-and-pop local store, from a person I know and trust. I encourage shopping locally, but everyone may not have that option. Fred, I think this is excellent advice, and it's something that if you wouldn't have sent the email, I probably would have glossed over or missed entirely in this episode. In the main topic, I'm going to be talking about buying a refurbished computer versus buying a new one, specifically with Apple. Fred, I hope you're not disappointed to find out that I'm an Apple person. I do want to let you know I have a solid appreciation for the Windows PC market as an engineer. I've grown very fond of the Windows machines I've used in the engineering industry. And for all of you who are listening, I want you to take Fred's advice to heart. There are stores online, even reputable ones like Amazon and eBay, as Fred mentioned, that will sell refurbished computers. And through one means or another, you're not really getting what you think you're getting out of the purchase. And this is definitely the case if you buy something that's completely used and unrefurbished. That's why for the main topic today, where we'll be looking into the Apple Silicon Lapbook lineup, we're going to only be considering refurbished options from Apple's certified refurbished store. And as Fred said, if you have someone that you trust locally who refurbishes computers, be them Apple or PC, you could probably get a better deal from them if you trust them and you know that they will stand behind what they're selling you. With that, let's jump into today's main topic. As I mentioned in the story, I have a relatively old machine that was just named vintage. So I need to try to figure out how to make the most frugal purchase in replacing it. Almost any machine is going to be an upgrade for me, but that's not going to prevent me from doing my due diligence and researching what kind of specs I need to select for this new laptop. If you're looking for someone who's going to be able to dive into the actual technical specifications of a laptop, I recommend you to the channel Max Tech. Max does an amazing job reviewing computers. And I found his reviews of the Apple machines to be A, the most thorough, and B, the most helpful. Max, if you see this episode from me, I want you to know you're doing a great deal of good for the computer consumer out there, helping make sure everybody understands what they're buying and is thoroughly informed. That aside, the focus of my podcast is money. It's personal finance. It's going to be frugality. And when it comes to frugality with computers, I mentioned it in the budget tip, I want to keep the cost that I spend on my computer per year as low as possible. I can do that by either driving the cost of the new machine down or by keeping that machine that I buy for many, many years. And in my experience, I typically want to replace a laptop as soon as it is named vintage by Apple. Seems to be the pattern with my last two, and I don't think it's going to be any different with this next one. Apple has a tendency of making their machine vintage sometime between 5 and 7 years of age after the initial release. And lately, they've been releasing an upgraded Apple laptop lineup once every 2 years, be it the Air or the Pro series. Now, I think all of the Apple Silicon machines have been pretty incredible so far, and I'm really looking forward to the M3 series coming out here, I think early 2024. I don't know the exact leaks, but I've been following it a little bit because that chip is going to be working with what I think is considered the physical limitation for how small a transistor processor can become, which means we're finally going to be running up to the physical limitations for making computers smaller and faster. And that's probably why Apple Silicon and other CPU manufacturers have started adding cores to their CPUs instead of just making them smaller. I digress a little bit. Let's focus on a little known fact on the Apple website. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of Apple's website, there's a little navigation list of different parts of their website. And in there, you can find the Apple Refurbished store, or you can Google Apple Refurbished and you might be able to find it that way. There, you can find machines that were purchased and then returned to Apple. Apple goes through the laptop, replaces anything that wasn't working properly, tests it thoroughly, and then lists it at a discounted price on the Refurb store. And you can find the latest M2 machines on there currently, as well as the M1 machines from 2-3 years ago. Additionally, I've seen a number of people on the internet making videos on, hey, I bought from the Refurb store. Was it a good experience? Is that machine going to be usable? Is it a great way to get good value for a discount going through Apple's Refurb store? What I haven't seen is someone do an analysis of how much the machine costs per year. So what we're going to do now is go through 3 different machines, an Apple Air, a 14-inch MacBook Max, and a 16-inch MacBook Pro with a Pro Series chip, and compare the prices and break them down to price per year. An assumption we need to make here is that if you buy the machine new, it will become vintage in 6 years. Now that's just an assumption so that we can do the comparison. And if you buy the previous model, it will be 2 years old. And if you wanted to wait for the current one to end up on the Refurb store, I assumed you're going to have to wait a year. I don't actually know how long it takes for them to start showing up on the Refurb store. So for the current lineup that we have, let's consider the Mac Air. The newest MacBook Air that we're going to be considering is the 13-inch with the M2 chip, which was, for all intents and purposes, quite the upgrade from the M1, in my opinion, mostly because of the design and the camera. So that we can compare apples to apples, I've assumed 16 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage for the models that we're going to compare in the Air category. A brand new M2 Air with these specifications is going to run you $1,799. In other words, that's going to be $299 per year if you keep the machine for 6 years. That exact same M2 Air from the Refurb store is going to cost you $1,549. And if we divide that number by 5, assuming it took us a year to find it on the store after the release, well, that's $310 per year, which is $11 per year more expensive than buying the M2 Air new upon release. Well, okay, that's not what I was expecting. I thought we'd get a better deal from the Refurb store. Well, maybe we're going to be able to get a better deal if we go to the M1 Air, the 13-inch M1 Air with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte. If we go to the Refurb store, we're going to find we can get that machine for $1,399, which unfortunately is the most expensive per year at $349 per year. That's roughly $50 per year more expensive than if we bought an M2 Air brand new upon release. Now, in getting that price per year, I divided by 4 years because a machine's going to last 6 before it becomes vintage from its release date, right? But we had to wait 2 years for the new model to come out so that the current one would drop in price. And what we find is that's going to be the most expensive way to own a laptop per year. Well, that's not looking very good if you thought that we were going to be able to get a better discount here on the refurb store. Maybe we'll get a different result with the 14-inch. Now, the 14-inch that I spec'd out here is an M2 Max, unbinned chip, fully loaded. Maybe not maximum RAM, but 64 gigabytes of RAM is an awful lot with 2 terabytes of storage. That's what I ran with. And that machine, brand new from the Apple Store, sticker price today would be $4,099. For 6 years, that means it's $683 per year. Well more than double what the brand new M2 Air would cost you per year. If you got the same machine off the refurb store, it would cost you $3,479, which is $13 more expensive per year if you got this thing a year after the release. It's $696 per year if you run the machine for 5 years. And this trend continues with the M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro. The M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro with comparable storage and memory was still $3,149 on the refurb store, which comes out to a whopping $787 per year if you run the machine for 4 years. That is $104 per year more expensive than buying the M2 brand new on release and running it for 6 years. And sadly, the identical trend is true for a 16-inch MacBook Pro. Going back to the lower spec of 16 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte of storage, brand new, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is going to run us $2,699 sticker price, or $449 per year. It's $9 per year more expensive if we wait and get the same model off the refurb store 1 year after release. And if we bought the exact same machine, but the M1 Pro version from 2 years ago, it's $520 per year. That's running a $2,079 machine from the refurb store for 4 years. I just can't believe that buying a machine off the refurb store, you get a discount. You'd be like, I'm going to save money by buying a machine that is used. But because it takes so long to get to the price that's lower, and the machines become replaced so often, it's going to be more expensive per year to buy the machines that way in all the examples that I covered. I did a break-even analysis. You'd have to run one of these machines for, I think, 7 years from the refurb store if you got the one that was 2 years old, or 9 years after the release. Meaning, if they make it vintage, 7 years after release, 6 to 7 years, you have to run it at vintage status for 2 to 3 years. Now, that's possible, but what if you end up with a machine that ends up having a manufacturing error, kind of like my 2011 MacBook Pro, where it was burning through the motherboards constantly, one a year? Well, you're going to end up replacing it beforehand and ultimately bumping up your cost for technology per year. Now, I recognize in the case where you just need to replace your laptop today, if you were looking at the brand new sticker price or the refurb one and you're not going to wait for another release, you're picking between the computers, you're probably going to be able to get the more frugal deal off the refurb store. But if you're in a position where you can be patient, is there a time frame on which, hey, if you see this pop on the refurb store after release, it's going to be more economical, it's going to be more frugal to choose? And from what I found, it's got to be somewhere around 6 months or sooner after release. 9 months at the latest in the examples, if you want it to be the same cost per year. So buying off the refurb store, if you want to wait for a new release to come out on the refurb store, you're going to be better off buying that new release up front and getting the extra 6+ months of use before it shows up on the refurb store. This blew my mind because I was dead set on getting a good deal from the refurb store when I was going to replace my MacBook here. I was pretty sure I was going to be able to find a frugal deal and I was going to be able to share with you, hey, don't buy a new computer from Apple unless you know this secret sort of thing. But that's not what I found. I found that you're going to be better off buying on the new release, the brand new machine, as early as you can, which means I better start saving up for when that M3 comes out so I can get it the first week it's out. Well, these results not only blew my mind, but they changed my mind. And if you learned something today, I'd like to invite you to follow, subscribe, like, and share this podcast so that we can continue to grow and share good information, good hope-filled financial futures with the world. Until next week, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.